Before we begin, I want to point out that there have been numerous characters in DC Comics history who have gone by the name Superboy. In this video, we'll do our best to unpack this long and sometimes convoluted history and explain the different super kids to you. Before we begin though, let me thank you for watching JL's Comics and pressing play. If you like videos like this, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want, the subscribe button as well. I upload new comic book, movies, superhero, anime content every week. So with that out of the way, let's jump into our story of Kid Supes. The first Superboy appeared in the 101st issue of a Golden Age DC title called More Fun Comics. It was the 1940s, and people like Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster weren't as concerned with continuity in a shared universe like we are now. Fun stories, war bonds, and the encroachment of family element along with the young sidekicks were all the rage. But the first Superboy was actually Superman, a young boy born to Lara and Jor-El on Krypton. As the destruction of the entire planet loomed imminent, Jor-El shot his 2-year-old son into space on a trajectory that found him on a farm owned by Ma and Pa Kent in Smallville, Kansas. They didn't have a kid, so they decided to keep this one and gave him the name Clark Kent. He had his powers already and was nicknamed Super Baby, eventually growing up to More Fun Comics 101 to evolve from Super Baby to Superboy. A year later, 1946, Superboy became 10 years old, and in 1957, he was 12. In other words, he aged 2 years in 12 publication years and 137 issues. 11 issues later is when he discovered the harmful effect that kryptonite has on him. That same year, the height of the Silver Age and of science fiction and pop culture, Superboy joined the time-traveling futuristic Legion of Superheroes. In Superboy 68, a flawed duplicator device made a flawed Superboy that he had to battle that they called Bizarro Superboy. This is a young Superboy that also helped train a Superboy from Earth 2. There was a random story in Action Comics 232 in which Superman had a foster kid from an astronomer. His foster kid, Johnny Kirk, became Superman Jr. Random, but Kurt Swan's first cover on that title. Another random story was World's Finest 154, taking place on fittingly Earth 154. We get to see Clark and Bruce with Kal-El Jr. and Bruce Wayne Jr. This was the first iteration of the Super Sons, although they weren't actually called Super Sons until issue 215. Remember that name, Super Sons. But World's Finest 263 took care of these two kids in the final secret of the Super Sons. They realized their lives were a lie and they were just computer simulations run by Superman's computer in the Fortress of Solitude. So now we're back to just our one Superboy who was joined up with the Legion of Superheroes until we learn much later on that they are in fact alive on Earth 16. So yep, that happened. Let's jump back to our primary Superboy. All that time travel with the Legion created time loops and paradoxes and all manner of Back to the Future and Endgame issues with the fabric of space and time. Meeting other Superboys and Supergirls didn't align with DC's new continuity, and it turns out that the Legion was actually wiping his mind after these encounters so that when he would meet the actual character in continuity on Earth 1, it wouldn't be weird when he acted surprised and unfamiliar with them. Eventually, the Legion took over the title and Superboy was moved to a solo book. By 1980s, The New Adventures of Superboy, Superboy was now 16 years old. With the release of the first issue also came the 35th anniversary of the character. Then, in 1992, Superman died at the hands of Doomsday. In his wake, a slew of people rose up, all calling themselves Superman. One was a punk rock style young kid, the Metropolis Kid, who called himself Superman. It turns out though that this Superboy was the Cadmus failsafe project, with a couple different names, Project Curb being one of them, that fused Superman's unstable DNA with stable DNA from Lex Luthor to make him a clone. When Superman came back, he reclaimed his name and the clone took on the moniker of Superboy. And after a stint in Hawaii, Superboy settled down with the Kents, where he took on the civilian name of Connor Kent. Ultimately, this kid was a protege of Superman's, not a true son, but he granted him a Kryptonian name from his house, the House of El, calling him Kon-El. He fell in love with this Wonder Girl named Cassie and became a member of Teen Titans, and later one of the founding members of a team of youngsters known as Young Justice. Connor's the Superboy that came to blows with Superboy Prime, dying in the process, but that's not the end of his story because comic. But wait, who the heck is Superboy Prime? This is a Superboy from another Earth, Earth Prime, whose parents teleported him here, to an Earth, from his dying Kryptonian planet. Instead of being set in a ship, though, that crashed at the Midwest, that the teleportation machine materialized him in the woods in Upper East Side of America, an area called New England. Naomi and Jerry Kent happened to be hiking in the woods when they stumbled across a random baby. So instead of calling first responders or CPS, they said, hey, let's keep this random baby. Now this Prime Earth is interesting because they are are aware of what's happening elsewhere in the multiverse by the way of comic book stories. They can see these things happening. So Naomi was already aware of Superman, of Clark Kent. With that in mind, she said, hey, let's call our new random forest baby Clark. That will be important later. Also, he didn't have powers when he was growing up, and he had a love interest named Lori around this time. Remember those things, we're going to come back to them in a moment. Superboy's powers manifested when Superman from Earth 1 showed up via a portal. But after Crisis on Infinite Earths raged through all of reality, collapsing universes down to one. Here's what happened from that point on. Superboy went to live in a paradise reality. While watching what was happening on this new Earth, he didn't like it, he was frustrated, he became angry over what was happening. He turned into the boy from Brightburn. One time he became so angry that he threw a punch that actually altered reality itself. So he left this paradise and he flew to Earth, and he met the Superboy there. It was Connor, by the way, deeming him unworthy of the title. Said, you're not Superboy, you're not worthy. A massive battle ensued, and the speedsters were able to throw him into the Speed Force, where he became temporarily trapped. He escaped from there. He was so powerful, he killed tons of people, and he wanted to cause a big bang to restart reality, kind of restart the Prime Earth that he was dearly missing. But the fight drained him, and New Earth Superman was actually able to defeat him, remanding him to a prison guarded by the Green Lantern Corps. But this was an interesting prison because it was a Red Sun prison. The Red Sun would suppress his powers until, yep, it's comics. The story doesn't end there. The Sinestro Corps turned this Red Sun yellow, allowing Superboy Prime to be freed, once again being caught up in a massive battle. One of the lanterns turned himself into a bomb and detonated himself next to Superboy Prime, except it didn't kill him. Instead, it projected him into the multiverse itself, where his atoms fused with the energy of the lantern. And once he came back, he was madder than ever, and now looking like an adult, he called himself Superman Prime. Narratively, it makes sense, but the reason for this also, on an editorial level, was relating to a copyright litigation by the Siegel and Schuster estate, which was in regard to the IP and who owned it. Superman Prime started killing other Supermans while he was using the Source Wall as a headquarters. You can see how immensely powerful he is. During a fight with Monarch in Earth 51, an explosion of quantum energy destroyed all of Earth 51's reality, and Prime was once again lost in the time stream. Later, there's a conflict with the Legion of Superheroes and Superman. They're fighting a villain calling himself Time Trapper. Time Trapper had saved the Superboy from a pocket universe after Crisis, but aha, plot twist. Time Trapper turns out to be an older Superboy Prime. Naturally, the two Superboy Primes went to blows. This caused a crazy time paradox to happen, where Superboy was flung back to his Prime Earth. But remember, I mentioned they know comic books. Well, they've been reading about Superboy's homicidal exploits through the cosmos, and they were horrified. Our last look at him was in his parents' basement, where he was reading message boards for DC Comics on the internet and trolling through all of his horrific acts that people were notating. Later, Alexander Luthor attacked him along with the Black Lanterns, where he decided that he was going to go to Manhattan and destroy DC headquarters, taking out the people who were writing the stories that turned his loved ones against him. He's forced, actually, during this time to put on a ring, and he himself becomes a Black Lantern. Black Lantern, Superboy Prime, and he's dying. As he's dying, Superboy realizes he hated what he became. He didn't like this angered, hateful, rage-filled, driven madman that he became. So his old love, Lori, showed up. She said she was sent by the actual DC writers who heard him and his woes and said that they would leave him alone. And they have. The writers instead, after this, kind of moved on to a new Superboy, which is named Jonathan Samuel Kent. Having first appeared as John in 2015's Convergence event, he was introduced as Superboy, the actual son of Lois and Clark, in 2016's Rebirth. John has been one half of the newest iteration of the Super Sons, which we talked about earlier, teaming up with Batman's son, Damian Wayne. He's learning how to be a boy, how to grow into a man, what it means to be the son of the man of tomorrow, and in true Spidey style, the responsibility that comes with great power. It's a great take on the character, and if you need a place to start, this is one place where I would recommend starting. You can also read about Connor and other like Teen Titans and Young Justice. Well, yes, they share a similar name. They're two very unique, distinct characters with very different backstories. Before you go, let me just add a couple others. Howard Chaykin's son of Superman's about a 15-year-old Superboy who didn't know his dad was Superman. And there's the evil Jonathan Lane Kent from an alternate New 52 timeline. This Superboy was raised from the dead as an extremely powerful telepath and taught to hate metahumans by a villain named Harvest. But he died before that series was canceled. Going back to Connor, Kon-El, again being the only Superboy in continuity until Jonathan Samuel Kent came along. Oh, and then there's Joel Kent in Superman and Batman Generations. But that's it, all about the history and origin of Superboy. Thanks for watching and listening, my friends. If you're here and haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button and join this rapidly growing JLS Comics family and be one of the first to know when we upload new content each week. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.